A couple of guys said they might pop in later for audience mode. Boom, boom. All right, we're good to go. All right, Golf Cast members, this is Brian Bailie here, bringing you another episode of Pour'n Birdies, basically the last Wednesday of every month, fourth month. Of course, we have Dr. Mike Grevlos with us again. Dr. Mike, how you doing?
Hi guys, I'm doing great. Yeah, so we've had some decent weather in South Dakota, which is unusual. So they're actually opening a golf range here in the next couple of days. So people are going to be able to get out and actually hit some shots out there.
Nice, nice. And then we do have with us as well Chris George. Chris, give us a little bio on you so everyone kind of understands what perspective you're coming from today.
Sure. I am a director of instruction at Kingsmill Resort in Williamsburg, Virginia, and my main focus is performance and short game.
Nice. And I've known Chris. Oh God, I don't even know how long I've known Chris now. Chris is a phenomenal golf coach. So if you are in the greater Virginia area, definitely Tidewater, Richmond, kind of that whole swath, you better go find Chris. He's phenomenal. So there you go. I gave you a free commercial.
Thanks, man.
No problem. So tonight I thought we would talk a little bit about putting, and more so not the fundamentals of putting, like when people think of putting stroke, but I'm talking more about the way people think on the putting green and how I think a lot of people actually comprehend differently on the putting green or put different pressures or things along that lines that can really be detrimental to performance. My hypothesis, Mike, and you let me know how wrong I am with this one, is because as we get closer to the hole, every stroke matters more. So once we get on the putting green, we can flare a drive at 250 and we don't care. We can hit a bad approach shot that ended up buried in a bunker. But man, once we get on that putting green and we start getting really close to that hole, boy, the closer we get, the more pressure and the more importance every shot is kind of the player. And that can be just absolutely brutal. So Mike, what do you think of my hypothesis of why people view putting different?
No, I think you're exactly right.
Show is over.
Hey, let's take a drink to your theory.
Cheers.
Okay, let's talk about that a little bit more because this is a very common tendency that we all have whenever we get close in time to a period in which a reward can either happen or we could lose it. We can either have a success or we can have a failure. And there's a lot of research on this actually in cognitive psychology and in behavioral economics. So basically, as we get closer and closer to some end point, and that's the key thing, it's some end point. And an end just means there's going to be some reckoning one way or another. And that is what's happening on that putting green. And so what happens then is as we get closer and closer to that, the value of that reward and the fear possibly of the anti-reward or the failure goes up and up and up. So as the value goes up, then we have that chance to flip an excitement situation where we can make a putt or have something good happen and then flip it to the other side of it. And so, yeah, I would have to say that I think that is what's special about putting, and what it probably for a lot of people some of the most challenging aspects of the game.
What are your thoughts, Chris?
Yeah, I definitely agree with that side of the focal point. I would add to that as the distance decreases, the expectation of success increases. So the closer you get to the hole, regardless of player level, your expectation of you being successful goes up. I would also throw in there realistic expectations, and that's matched up with your skill level, right? So, tour players make, we'll call it ish 48 to 50% of 8-footers. And again, that's based on distance. That doesn't have a lot to do with the slope or the difficulty of the putt. That's a topic for just a strictly putting discussion maybe later. But, the ability to understand that if you have an 8-footer, you need to know that even on your world's best day, you could miss 50%. So let's say that you're a 15 handicapper. Your percentage isn't going to be 50%. It's going to be far less than that. So know that you're going to miss more than you make. But as you practice skill acquisition, performance games, technique, all those kinds of things go into the process of success so that you don't have to rely on hope when you get to that moment when you want to make the putt.
So I have a good one for you guys. So let's say we do have a player that as they get closer to the hole, they put on new pressures. What would be some ways to train and to think differently on the golf course to maybe relax a little of that pressure?
Well, want me to start? And
Sure.
I'm sure that you two will have some good drills and things that you do with players. But I guess from my perspective, I would want to talk to the player about what goals they have during the whole process of planning the putt and executing the putt, and then the post putt, and understand what goals would be the most important, the most relevant, the ones that are going to be most related to their best performances. So that basically, I think if people have heard me before, they know that I think about goals as being the key organizer of all the other stuff that's going through our minds and our bodies and even our movement patterns. And so, going through the whole process in which you are predicting the break, checking out distance, and all those different aspects, if they can look at those as specific kinds of goals, and each one's a goal in itself. And one of the things that can help is because a lot of times what happens, of course, they're indecisive at the putt. They're indecisive. They're not really sure what's going on. And so, or they go back and they start second guessing themselves after they've made a decision. And so one of the things that can help some of the players is to be sure that once you go through a process, you do it with the level of focus that you know that once that process is done, that particular piece of the assessment of the putt, for instance, once it's done, your goal has been achieved, and that is just so important for someone to go like, okay, that is truly done. So like usually when we achieve a goal, we can move on. So this is what this is all about. You get that taken care of. You've got the break predicted, or you get the distance. You go, okay, I got that. You move on to the next thing, and you get it all taken care of. So you realize that each time that the goal is achieved, you realize that that is the signal or trigger to move on to the next goal. And there's a goal for each aspect of it all the way through execution. And I just think that that's so important for people to understand and to commit to that, because what happens is typically is the fear that is usually the problem in putting, and certainly there's other problems too, but fear is usually the problem. And so that fear comes into play because they haven't fully felt like they completed the goals before. And so they just keep recycling that same stuff that keeps coming back, and now they're over the putt, and now they're not really sure what to do or how it's going to work, and the uncertainty increases. So I know that's a little different idea there, but and you have to understand, but I just think that's so important because that allows somebody to move on.
Yeah.
If I think we all know that once we hit a goal, we feel good and we can do that. So I think that's an important part on the putting green as well.
Yeah, I say pressure certainly is a product of perception. One, are you aware of the environment? Are you prepared for what it is? Do you have tactics to be able to manage the environment? And it comes down to training, honestly, both mentally training, physically training, technique training. But when you come in and you have a 5-footer, just from a concept we talked about, hitting the drive out of play versus missing a putt or not making the putt. Missing a 5-footer has a bigger strokes lost on your scorecard than hitting a ball out of bounds statistically. So the key is that when you go in to hit this putt, what is the process that's involved in this, as Mike talked about? But instead of the viewpoint of feeling the pressure, I hope I don't miss this putt, I hope I don't pull it, I've been pulling putts. You need to go in there and allow yourself to be successful, number one, by knowing about your training habits in the past that walk into that putt with confidence. You watch some of the greatest putters that you'll see week in and week out that are playing the weekend, that are making money putts to finish in the top 10 or the top 5 or to get their status. for that week, like Luke Clanton coming up. He needs one more point to be able to make it. When he walks in to hit a putt, he walks in with confidence and authority and desire to execute that process instead of, worrying about his technique or those kinds of things. So if you walk into this putt and you allow yourself, as you walk in, to go, I've made thousands of 5-footer left or rights on a 2% slope downhill, I'm going to drain this one too. That's only more fuel to your fire success.
No, I think it's interesting. I've had the good fortune to work with a wide range of players, some great putters, some average putters, some poor putters. And it is amazing to me. And we'll go to kind of what you talked about, Mike, with fear, but I think a lot of what they do, or kind of the way that they act on the green, is more of a protection base. Well, I'm a bad putter. Of course, I miss a 6-footer. Like, of course, I've had so I see a lot of the times, I don't see that much on the range or with approach shots. I don't hear people going, well, I'm just a bad approach player. You don't hear that very often. So I think a lot of times too, with that getting closer to the hole with more pressure, they start to build that little safety net of, well, I'm just bad at this. And then that makes it okay. And that, to me, I think is the hardest part to kind of break through as a coach.
The idea that whole kind of a negative doubt-filled putter,
Yeah.
who probably remembers so many of their missed putts and forgets a lot of their made putts and all that, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, it is. It's that's kind of part of what happens when we value something so highly. We remember the outcomes better, and we're going to miss a lot. Like as you said, Chris, the 8-foot putt 50% of the time would be really good if you did that. And so you're going to be missing probably more. Most people are going to be miss more of their 8-footers than they make, and so yeah. And then of course your expectations piece too. When you have a expectation that you should make a 3-footer or whatever it is, and you miss it, that also is going to enhance the memory of that experience, because it's a contrast between what you expected and what happened. And so that all of that feeds into that doubt that you're talking about, Brian. I think it all feeds into the negative thinking that people end up having on the green. And as Chris said, be able to walk in with that kind of confidence and desire to make a putt, or at least to make a good stroke, or whatever it would be in terms of the goal, that does require training for a lot of people, because they're not there. And I think that people need to train that process in themselves, because these are these mental habits that are hard to die in those very strong contexts like a putting green. And so I think that what you're all saying is exactly right. And but it really takes training, and most golfers don't train their minds. Coaches like you have a real strong appreciation for the mental part of the game, and so you would help them with that. But a lot of coaches don't really know how to, and or even think about it that much, and they just kind of give them the cliches, but they don't really help them learn how to change their brain so they can change the way that they respond on that putting green.
Yeah. Chris?
Yeah, that response, short-term memory is really, really key. You execute your process and you do your job, and sometimes the ball goes in, and it goes in more often if you have proper speed with an appropriate read to match those things. But being able to work on training and doing it properly. So there's skill-based, there's technique-based, there's certainly performance-based, and probably one of the more important pieces to making putts is if you just train performance. So this is just an example that you could take away and go practice tomorrow. It's a 3-4-5 drill. So 3 feet, 4 feet, 5 feet. You hit 6 putts to 3 different holes. 3 putts from one side, 1 at 3, 1 at 4, 1 at 5. Go to the other side of the same hole, 3, 4, 5 feet, and do that to 3 different holes. So you got a total of 18 putts. How many of those putts did you make? Those are crucial 2-putt opportunities if your lag putting is a little bit off, or you misjudge speed, or it's windy and you're not able to calculate those kinds of things. For example, if you happen to not be aware of the environment and you have a downhill downwind putt and you hit it the normal force that you would on a flat putt with no wind, then that ball is going to move a little bit farther past the hole than you had predicted. So you're going to need to be able to make that. But if you set the goal and you go, okay, this month, the next 30 days, I'm going to practice. And my goal is to make 12 at 18. And depending on your skill level, that might seem too low. For some, it might seem too high. You might want to do 14 or 16 out of 18. 16 out of 18 from 3, 4, and 5 feet, especially when you're on 2 or 3% slopes, is not easy. And it's going to challenge you, and it's going to allow you to go through your process, which we've talked about how critical that is. And then I would also add the timing of that process, how long it takes, what you should be focused on. Because if we shorten the time window, you're going to cut out some stuff that you may not need. And it may allow you to be more free and do some really cool stuff to be able to hold more putts at the proper speed.
So kind of going back, I had a college player, wasn't a very great putter. She was always the weakest part of her game, but she hid behind, I've never been good. I strike it well. I do everything well. I just suck at putting. It's kind of who I am. So kind of in her sophomore year, for me to kind of bridge that gap, now her family would remind her how bad of a putter she was, and her teammates would kind of rib her a little bit on how bad of a putter she was. So what we started to do in her sophomore year is on all putts, kind of 6 feet and in, we just, I just started to say, what do you do? And she goes, I make putts. And that was kind of our little, on the putting green, I'd be like, what do you do? And she goes, I just make putts. So we just started, fake it till you make it or whatever. Her sophomore year, we just started to say, hey, we just make putts 6 feet and in. This is what we do. This is what we're concentrating on. And then by her senior year, she really transformed into, I would not say a great putter, but a good enough putter where she could actually was fighting for All-American status. It wasn't holding her back anymore. So what are some tricks that you can do with athletes that kind of have that protection mode of I suck and I'm okay with it? Or, I don't know if I want to do the work to get out of the middle side of why I'm not performing well.
Well, that's fear. I mean, fear really is the emotion of self-protection. That's for sure. And so that's what it's all about. Well, I liked what you did. And I guess I have a question back to you before I follow up on that. I'm curious about what you think happened with her that translated I make putts into actually becoming a better putter. What do you think happened either in terms of her practice or her mind that helped her translate that into better putting?
It was all of it. We completely transformed the way she practiced. So we brought some sense and some order to it. But she was very quick. When I have a player and they miss a putt, I can quickly categorize why they missed the putt. Was it the read? Was it speed? I can really have a good sense quickly of what happened. And for me, that makes it very simple because, it was a face issue. Well, can we fix a face issue? Of course we can. So let's not worry about it. But for a lot of players that don't have the ability to kind of categorize what just happened, she fell back into that protection mode of I've never been very good at it. So we did restructure everything we did. We did do some technical work, some equipment changes. So we kept moving pieces to get her better. But until I could get her to believe that she could make putts, and I mean, I felt much better with her off the green chipping for birdie than hitting a great shot to 7 feet. Like I was like, well, she's just not going to make that. Like literally, I think she has a chance to chip this in. Yeah, she's not going to make that. Two, kind of as she kind of grew through. So I don't think by us saying that, I don't think that was the magic elixir, but it got rid of some of that. Now I know self-talk can be good and bad. Negative self-talk can be good for some players, but again, when you have that talk and you keep telling yourself you're bad and you start believing you're bad, I was like, I need to reroute that somehow. And so we just kind of came up with that little catchy so the fun part was that we'd be on the golf course and she's not putting well. I go, what do you do? She goes, make putts. I go, okay. I just walk away. I don't need to do anything more. Okay, you're going to make this putt. Fine. So I think to me, it was just trying to give her a trigger or something to hook into. So when she kind of fell back into that protective mode that we could try to pull her out without saying, hey, let's check elbow position. Let's check. Who cares? Do you make putts or not? Of course I do. Well, let's go make putts.
Okay, super. Thanks. That makes great sense. I mean, that's so interesting. It's like what's the relationship between thoughts and movement? What's the relationship between your intention or goal and movement? And so thoughts, so in my mind, this is my view, the way I understand the brain to work. I don't see thoughts as having a direct impact on the movement pattern, but they have a very important, influential impact on what feeding back and what goal they're going to create next and what they're going to do next. And so I always think it's the goal that creates the force of the movement and the particular movement pattern that's been practiced. But I really like that. So I like the idea of changing thoughts in order to change something else that will eventually get to the real change in the movement patterns and or the decisions and or the responses, the emotional responses, and all those things that changed with her. So I love that. So one of the things that I like to do with a putt, somebody who's putting, is to really explore what goal makes the most sense for them. Because I just don't think there's one best goal for everybody. Putting, I don't know what you all think, but I tend to think it's so individualized.
It is.
Works for one may very much not work very well for another, and so for some people, they want to be thinking about holding the putt when they're putting, and that for them is great because they're very approach oriented and they don't get too upset about it all. So they're very much into whatever I have to do to get that ball in the hole, and that works for them. They tend to be the putters who go in with confidence, with desire, and this real excitement to make a putt. Other people, on the other hand, have so much fear and so much more of anxiety prone, and for them, having a whole different goal may make sense, such as the goal of simply getting the ball started well, and that might be the key for that player is really letting go of the importance of making the ball go in the hole and just making a nice start of the roll with the right speed or a good speed. Or even the words can right speed for some would make sense. For others, it would be the best speed. So even the language like this can make a difference in how a person's going to experience that stroke. So I just think playing around with that is so helpful. And I don't know if the two of you have done that with players, really working with the different. And oftentimes we talk about, well, that's the focus. What are they going to focus on when they're stroking the putt? But in reality, it's the goal that leads to the focus. And so it's really playing around with the goal that they would have. So I'm kind of curious what you think on that, because my experience is you got to kind of figure out what's best for each person, and that's an exploratory process. But maybe you found something that has worked with most players that from your own experience. I'd be curious to know.
All right, Chris, go ahead.
Yeah, there's a lot to unpack with that. I was making notes, as Brian could tell. So there's thought. I mean,
I can't talk for 1 minute or less. I
love it.
Sorry.
There's thought, there's execution, and every player, no matter what skill level, their desire is to make the putt. And again, there's no magic elixir that can do this other than habit formation and creation and execution. And that is, what if you gave a player a ball and said you could put it anywhere around the hole, but we're going to make every putt we hit today. They can place it anywhere they want. So they have the element of freedom. They have the element of how far away, that's their choice. But the whole premise behind it is every putt they hit today goes in. And they don't hit until they miss. They just hit every putt that goes in. Some are going to put it at 2 feet, 3 feet. They'll move around the hole, different breaks, and be random. Over time, having studied this and done putting studies on this, over time, that player builds that internal confidence, that execution of the ball's going in the hole. They start to train their eye to see the ball go in the hole at the right speed. And over time, the distance, because their confidence is growing, because they know they're going to make the putt, I don't even mind if they move it back 4 inches, just farther tomorrow, and continue that process. Go some a little shorter, some a little farther. All of a sudden, that dispersion of their distance of putts made goes bigger. And as that grows and the ball goes in the hole and all they see is the ball going in, again, they have to stop before they miss. And they can come back 30 minutes later, so they have to recall what they've done. They recall the experience. They do it to a different hole, but they start believing that. And again, whatever distance you want, as long as we make all of them. It
What
starts to
happens
change
when
their
they miss?
outcome.
What
When
happens?
they miss, I was going to ask.
What happens at that point, Chris?
There's some other skills that they go and do. They have to go hit some different shots and come back. And
Okay, then. Okay.
yeah.
Got it.
Well, I
So,
think
but the first thing to that miss is training the response. It's okay to miss,
it is.
and I'm supposed to miss a percentage of putts from certain distances, and it's mathematically okay, and that's all right. And you train them to know that.
Yeah, I think the interesting part is kind of what you said. Words. It's important that everybody's a little bit different. I know Chris has long-term runs with players, but when I was a collegiate coach, you would have 10 players coming in with 10 different swing coaches, 10 different putting coaches, 10 different vernaculars. Like everything was different. So I learned very, very early certain words to certain athletes were very good and they responded very well. And certain words or certain way that you would lay out something to another athlete would be completely detrimental. So I think again, kind of, circling back to what Dr. Mike talked about is words and how to project as a coach, how to project meaning and the importance of different factors is massive. I'll never forget we had one college player. It was my first year at Virginia, so I was still a young coach, didn't really know a ton. Player was like, mom was like, she's a terrible putter, and she was a bad putter. And so she just needs to hit it closer. I'm like, that seems a little dangerous, but okay. So she went out the next event, and on the first 6 holes, she hit it probably inside of 5 feet on the first 6 holes and didn't make a single effing putt. And I'm like, that was the best learning point I've ever seen in my life. I'm like, be careful what you wish for. You just might get it. but that concept of a lot of times is for an athlete, understanding kind of their language and what they need to do to be able to perform well is really, really important. And I've done a lot of damage with players as I'm trying to help them because I wasn't able to kind of give them what they needed to be able to perform very well. So for all those that are in the coaching side of it and parent side of it as well, be very cognizant of how you use words and try to relate things to your athletes because you can do good and bad. Trust me, I've done both, but it's quite interesting on that side of it. But kind of circle back, thinking of if I'm an athlete, I'm performing at a certain level, my next level up I'm trying to achieve. So maybe I'm shooting mid 80s. My goal is now to break 80. So now I'm getting, 34 putts, 35 putts down to maybe, 31, 32 putts, kind of pushing, get into that 70 categories. What are some of the processes inside of the mind that can help you work that way? And then Chris, I'll throw you a softball. Some of the technical pieces you can work on to move that needle.
Well, that's kind of those transition points are usually challenging for people. They get used to a reality, of course, and then it just seems people just describe it as it just seemed weird and strange to me to have a whole new reality. I mean, the brain really does seem to create a world around what perception is. And so that perception is going to be based on all the experience they've had in their game and then the score because they're going to put a large value on that score. And so that's going to be a part of what forms this whole perceptual reality for them. So now scores changing really is a different reality. And so people have to change their understanding of what that is. Now, so sometimes you can help people. Sometimes you have to have a conversation about all the similarities between the game and what they're doing from a score of 83 to a 78. And like, what are all the similarities? What are all the commonalities? Because now we're bridging the gap between those realities. So it's very simple, really. It's an easy conversation to have, and it's not it's not magic at all. It's just what are the commonalities between shooting an 83 and a 78, and pretty much everything else is the same except few shots, and those shots are not mysterious, and then that's where technique obviously comes into play and all that. And so that's, to me, a very simple and easy conversation to have with somebody. Now, of course, there's other issues with it, because there's the issue of the point in time in which you're really close to shooting the 79 or the 78. But if you've had these discussions ahead of time because you've anticipated that this is going to happen, you are going to hit that point. And so let's talk about what the possible experiences emotionally, mentally, and what kind of goals you're going to switch. If you when you get to that point, because you will get to that point at some point. And so you have to anticipate all those kinds of things, and then you have something set up, ready to go when they notice that they've just switched what they're trying to do at this point, when they've been doing great the whole round and now they're going to switch it up. So I just think a lot of that preparation, and I think most players don't prepare for it. They just are hoping that they're going to get there at some point, and then it happens and they're not sure what just happened. But I like to prepare ahead of time. I like people to realize that, hey, when, like, even professional players, if they're mini tour players, I want them to start practicing interviews and things like that, because at some point you're going to be in a situation where you're going to have an interview that, because you just won a tournament, and or there's a 2-day event and you're in the lead, and somebody might interview you, maybe it's a qualifier, or whatever it would be. And so I want people really knowing exactly how they're going to be. I mean, way back in Annika Sorenstam's day, she early on admitted that she would throw tournaments because she did not want to give the speech afterwards. I mean, those are the kind of things that you don't think about, but
Yeah.
most people aren't so aware of that kind of a fear, but most people are just anxious about it. And people could truly get a little bit afraid of that without even knowing it. And lo and behold, they just lost the lead at the end, and they didn't have to because they didn't prepare. So I really believe in that. I believe in, a lot of people are afraid to look at what could go wrong because they think, oh, that's going to make it go wrong then. No, it's going to give you the best chance to prevent that going wrong, and because you have a backup. And that kind of confidence is in terms of your ability to respond to something that happens is probably the big difference maker for a lot of players who are really good.
Fran, welcome. We'll let Chris finish up and I'll circle back to you. So one of our other coaches jump in. So Chris, give me some thoughts about that, what that looks like as you're trying to jump scoring kind of modes.
Yeah, I would start with when you're improving the make percentage distance wise, there's some elements that are involved in that. Obviously, we need some refined technique on being able to start the ball optimal ways, where if you were to roll a ball with a line, you could get that line to roll pretty decent. That would be one from a technique standpoint. But more importantly, for the players that are listening to this, I would say learn to read greens accurately and predict break properly. Second would be, you cannot practice speed drills too much.
I would flip those, but yes.
I get it.
Yeah.
But they both are relevant.
They're cousins. They're cousins. Yeah.
And just to give you something you can take right out the door tomorrow afternoon when you're working on your putting, put 2 coins 1 foot apart and putt any distance from 1 foot to 10 foot, and learn to stop your ball between those 2 coins on a pretty flat putt to start with. And you could do a little uphill, a little downhill, a little right to left, a little left to right, but start basic. From 10 to 20 feet, put them 2 feet apart. And from 20 to 30 feet, put them 3 feet apart. And give yourself the opportunity to train and learn to be able to get that ball to stop in that window. And that's going to greatly enhance your putts made percentage with the complement of accurately reading the green. And that will certainly start moving the needle, because in the reality of putts, from a player that shoots 70 to a player that shoots 100, there's a difference in 8 putts, 8. The player that shoots 100 is going to have 38 putts. The player that shoots 70 is going to have 30 putts-ish, right? It's made up of a couple different things, but let's just round numbers. That's a big difference in tee to green shots versus putts. and a player that shoots 100 versus a player that shoots 70. The as the score goes down, the value of making those putts goes higher. The higher skilled player is going to make more of the putts inside of 8 feet, certainly. And that player, as they even get bigger, is going to have a higher percentage of putts made from 9 to 20 feet. So that's where you start seeing these sub-par rounds. So in putting, being able to have that conversion rate as big as possible, those would be my 2 main areas, which is speed control and accurately predicting the break.
And what I find really funny is dispersion rates with ball striking match putting, which is really funny. So a higher handicapper, someone that's going to say upper 80s, is going to be a 20% dispersion on approach shot, right? So 100 yards, they're going to be basically 20 yards, kind of what their average dispersion would be. Putting is about the same from what we had learned back in the past. So again, if you really think about it, where we talk about speed and read being correct, with Scotty Scheffler and I, I'm a shooting 90. Scotty's best in the world. Scotty at 20 feet is going to hit it to a foot or two because his dispersion is going to be 10%. Mine's going to be 20, 25%. So all of a sudden I have a 4 or 5 foot miss. So my ability to control that golf ball dispersion wise is much wider. So why is Scotty much better than me? Because he's got that tap in that Chris talked about earlier. And now I'm grinding over a 4.5, 5 footer. So again, having that understanding of ability and the tighter, so dispersions works on the putting green as well. And the tighter we can take that dispersion near the hole is only going to benefit you. And that does come from training. So Fran, thanks for joining us. What are your thoughts on kind of moving a player from, I know Fran works with a lot of players at a lot of different calibers, from moving them from one segment to the next, kind of focus on putting. And give us a little bio on who you are as well.
Hello, guys. Sorry for being late. I just finished dinner with my family. I have many players in different levels. Some are beginners, and I also have some scratch players, many juniors. And what I find as most common mistake in my students is that they don't train putting at all. They find it boring. They prefer to hit better drives. Maybe even they try to hit 15 greens in a round of golf. And if you're a 20 handicapper, you won't hit 15 greens. There's no chance. Learning how to train is what makes the difference. In most cases, learning how to get into a process where you can improve little by little the small pieces is what makes you improve much faster than trying to be like the best as you could imagine, as you see on TV. So what I try most of the time is to keep it simple for many of my students, even the beginners or even the scratch player. Focus in one thing at a time. Most of the issues can be solved in just, if you get focused on the correct thing, you can solve it in 2 weeks, 3 weeks, a month, and then you just need to keep an eye on it. It's a terrible mistake to think you fixed something and you don't have to pay attention anymore. But being consistent with the fixing is what makes it much easier to keep it going and going down on your handicap and improving your score. One thing I find sometimes hard to teach to my students is how to read speed. Chris, were talking about speed. There are many types of players on the putting green. Sometimes they hit it just with the swing weight. Sometimes they like to hit the ball with a bit of hands. They get a bigger swing arc, shorter swing arc. So trying to get a basis for that. If you want to be hitting it, okay, let's see what's your rhythm. If you want to make a swing with your putting, let's see how far do you take that backswing and keep the same rhythm every single time. So I find hard to get the beginners consistent with speed because greens change every single time you play them. Maybe not on the same course, but in different courses. But once they get the speed, they start lowering a lot of putts, and that helps them a lot. They start avoiding the 3 putts and 4 putts. So with a beginner, I would focus a lot on putting, but also on avoiding the out of bounds or the hazards with the driver, and not so much on hitting greens. But maybe a scratch player needs to start hitting the ball closer to the pin to be able to make some birdies. So yeah, different approaches for different levels, but knowing what every player needs is a key for it. That's what I try to look for.
I like that. And this will be kind of the final piece for tonight. So for a lot of athletes on the putting green, they might have a inflated idea of maybe they think they're a very good putter. So I don't work on putting. I putt fine. I'm a good putter. But, you know, the data, all these pieces to show. What would be some ways? And I had an athlete that came to me that's going to play women's golf at Vanderbilt next year. And she came to me and really thought she was a good putter. And I basically put her through a skill training assessment and really opened her eyes on what that is. But when you have an athlete that says they're really good at something, and you as a coach or as a mental coach would kind of have to give them a little, let's have a talk.
Yeah.
What would be some thoughts on that, Mike?
You just hit my Achilles heel.
Oh.
So here's what I mean by that. I've had a couple golfers who believe that and have had that, and I haven't necessarily seen the results to match it, and I have a hard time with that one, because it's like part of me's I'm so happy that they feel so good about their putting, and I'm like, let's just wait it out.
Let's just hope it gets there.
Yeah,
confidence is key.
Hopefully, eventually.
I love it. This is the first time I've stumped Mike. I love it.
It's so true. You have. And so I'm probably not the person to ask, because I'm just hoping that they're going to make it through, because part of me doesn't want to deflate their confidence.
Yeah.
That's really what I'm talking about. And they got enough to work on. So I'll just let that one go, and we'll see what happens.
I like that.
That's not a great answer, but that's truly what I've done.
That's a push. I love that. Chris.
I'm going to drop some skills assessments on them right away and expose, I'm going to put them in that certain area. Obviously, we've done that enough to know what area where we want to drop the ball, what break, and there are challenging putts. And, you recall tournament players or member guest players, or, just your weekend 4-ball, they're putts that were missed and cost them a drink hole or cost them, a $2 Nassau. So, when you're looking at great putters that say they're great, believe they're great, but their performance and their statistics and their execution across the board statistically, and then certainly when it's in the moment, those pressure moments, as we started out the conversation with, and there's not conversion, then there's a missing link that you're great, but you could be amazing. Like, let's go to that next level. Yes, you're great, but here are the 2 different putts that we need to spend the most time on for your conversions to go up and for you to be extraordinary. Like, let's go there.
Yeah. Fran, you got anything on that? Or you haven't run across that yet?
Yeah, many times I would ask for the amount of putts they've hit the past 10 rounds.
Well, they'll have an excuse why they want to putt. You don't worry about it. They're good putters. They'll be like, that's just...
Yeah, they say they're good putters, but once they start taking notes, they realize they get to their own conclusions.
That's right.
And they will realize they're missing most of the 2-meter putts. But even many times they think they're good putters, but just because they're approaching all day and they are saving par maybe 30% of the time, and they think, hey, I'm a great putter. Your short game maybe is great. You're getting it close, but you're just making 30%. Maybe you're not getting it close enough, or you're not holding many putts.
Yeah. To add to that, I would say, well, what are you basing that criteria? What's your standard of, I'm a great putter? Like, how are you measuring this?
That's an important piece.
if we're just going to start at the level that many in this group are listening to this, podcast and video are, and there are going to be a wide range of players, but let's just say across the board, this is a great place to start. Take the total number of distance in feet that you played in a round of golf, your first putt distance, and then how much distance was left after the first putt to the hole, subtract that, and let's see how small that number is. And I have a list of where that break line is of extraordinary to different player levels of what defines that difference. And when you start getting that reduction in number and your total number of distance of putts made goes up, we can start moving that needle. But what's the criteria of measurement and how are you determining whether you're great?
No, I think it's good, but I have to agree, Mike. They're the unicorns. You don't see many not great putters believe they're great putters. So, but I agree wholeheartedly. You don't want to destroy them. You still want them to have that belief, but kind of like Chris said, in a very small version. Let's take your greatness and make it, next level great.
There you go.
And to highlight those pieces, but man, I've enjoyed this. Mike said right out the gate, I nailed it. I stumped him.
Oh yeah.
Show, to be honest, we're running up on our hour here in a couple minutes, so we'll exit out here with some final thoughts. But just to give everyone who's listening a little idea, for those that know or don't, I've created a magazine through Golf Cask, and it will be coming out in 3 days. Woo! I better get working. And all three coaches here are actually contributors to it, so I appreciate that. And make sure you go find the magazine online, and of course go find these guys if you have more questions or looking to progress inside of the golf world. Whiskey world, don't go to Mike. Bad show up, but other than that, these guys are absolutely phenomenal. So kind of as we're wrapping up this show, Mike, what are your thoughts? Just kind of a closure on how to help people on the putting green think just a little bit better.
I mean, there's the two types of goals, approach and avoidance. And the approach is going after whatever you want at that moment, and avoidance is moving away from it. And I think it takes some exploration for the putter to really figure out when they're being avoidant and when they're being approach. What's the best approach mentally for them, knowing that it may be very different than somebody else, exploring it, playing around with it, really doing some systematic trial and error. And so I think you can do some of this stuff with some of the various drills that have already been shared tonight and other drills as well. You can add that mental component to it and to see how well you do. I like Chris's drill when it comes to making all the putts. I do personally like the approach of wanting to hole a putt as opposed to necessarily just having a nice start to it. But that's not best for everybody because they're already in kind of this vulnerable mode. But I really like that. I like having the goal of making a putt, even if it's a 20 or 25 footer, because as long as you have the best speed, then there's no issue with it in my mind. You're not trying to ram it in and all, which is the problem that some people have. They're too aggressive trying to make it. But as long as you have the best speed at the same time with a nice prediction of the break, why not have the goal of making it? That's how I tend to look at it. But some people need to back off that a little bit, and hopefully they can move in that direction, because that's a lot of fun when you have that mentality on a putting green, whether it's 20 feet, 25, 30 feet, or 2 feet.
Chris?
Yeah, I would say training is very important, and what you practice is important. How you practice is vital. And there's no question that training and the process of your training in regards to putting needs to be a high importance on speed, control, and green reading. And if you have time to do that, you're going to make a big impact. And then set aside time for performance training, conversion drills, that 3-4-5 drill that I told you about earlier, and then take the time to just explore and drop the ball anywhere from around the green where you think you can make 100% of the putts, and you hit putts and you stop at whatever number you make and you keep making them, and you go, okay, that's enough for today, and I'm going to move on. And allow yourself to think outside the box, be confident, and know that the process is going to allow you to be successful in the future.
Brian?
Yeah, well, I would separate for the average golfer that they probably never train putting. I would say start to dedicate at least 15 minutes every time you go out and practice on the putting green. Just 15 minutes. You can get to any hole, put a ball north, south, east, west from the cup, any distance you want, maybe 5 feet, 10 feet, 15 feet, and learn how to start the ball on line. And then you can stand further away from the hole and train the lag pads. Not trying to get it 10% dispersion, but at least not being many times I hear the phrase, I want to make this one, and they get 6 feet past the hole. So just try to get it somewhere near and be consistent with it. Try to repeat the same distance every single time. And once you start turning that dispersion down, you will find easier to make more 2 putts on the lag ones instead of 3 putting. And that will definitely improve your score very, very fast.
I totally forgot to ask you, Mike, but we'll use this as a tease for a conversation forward. What about the putter that when it comes to birdie, they never make the putt, but yet it's for par or bogey, they never miss the putt?
Yeah.
We'll let you think on that one. And I've even had it the opposite, where when it was for birdie, I had players that drain it all the time, but it got to be par or bogey, they were just kind of, eh. So again, changing that reward system and how some people thrive different ways. We'll let you think on that, and we'll tease people to come back for that. How's that?
Sounds good. I love that one.
So thank you again, coaches, for being a part. Fran for jumping in. Fran's from Argentina. I know his dialect sounded like he might have been from Alabama, but no, he's actually from Argentina. And then Chris as well for joining us. And we look forward to bringing you more of these in the months to come. I hope it was insightful for you all that are trying to perform a little bit better on the putting green. So thank you again, and I look forward to bringing you more shows like this in the future. So cheers. All right, gentlemen, hold on one second here.